Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to Andy's Book Club. And this week, we're finally finishing up The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. So, the conclusion's kind of short, but good thing is we have an afterword, which is a lot longer. So, combined, it's about the size of a regular chapter. So, lots of content to talk about today still. And hope you all enjoyed the book so far. And yeah, as I said, today we're wrapping it up. Okay, let's jump into the conclusion now. So, the conclusion begins with Gladwell talking about a seminar that was run for breast cancer, and initially it wasn't very successful. It is an informational session for breast cancer and breast cancer awareness and for people that have breast cancer or how to prevent it and stuff. So it was not very successful when it ran at churches. But then the host decided to move the seminar to beauty salons, and then it became massively successful. Sometimes an idea just needs a little bit of tweaking, and it could be something as simple as where to hold the seminar, right? So the idea is that, at beauty salons is mostly women. So it's going to be a place where you appeal to people who will want to know about things like breast cancer, which is a disease that most affects women. So at churches, it's kind of kind of random and out of place. And there could be people that don't care as much about breast cancer. There could be a mixture of, 50% men, 50% women, and the men might not care as much about breast cancer. So again, just little things to tweak your message on that'll make it a lot more effective. So in this case, the host, she changed the medium of communication for her message by raising breast cancer awareness by choosing the beauty salon. The point of that is that we must reframe the way that we think about the world after learning about tipping points, which is the point of this whole book that Gladwell is trying to make. So we've talked about other examples throughout the book. In case you forgot, stuff like Sesame Street, Blue's Clues, the Rule of 150, Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, and the murder of Kitty Genovese. So all of these events kind of relate to Gladwell's point of the tipping point in some way, shape, or form. In case you need a reminder of any of these examples, we talked about all of them in the previous videos. So go find where the chapter is for that example, and then watch the Andy's Book Club video if you don't want to read it. But I would recommend you actually read those chapters as well if you need a refresher. As humans, we like to think about how we have free will and how our actions are all independent. But the reality is that we're all heavily influenced by our environment and what happens around us. So the world might seem immovable, but there are so many events that are just probably right on the tipping point right now that we don't even know. So the question of the day today, I'll ask it early. The question of the day today is, do you think there's any events that are on the border, that are on the point of tipping? And if so, what is it, right? In your opinion. So you don't have to be right, but maybe it could be a technology product, right? You think a technology is just going to take off. So if you guys know me, I run another channel called Andy's Fire Club where I talk about finance and investing. So I have my fingers on the pulse of the tech industry, and I really think things like full self-driving, right? Like Tesla's full self-driving. I think they're very close to unlocking full self-driving. So maybe that's the next thing that's on the tipping point. But that's just my opinion. So anyways, that's the conclusion. And for the rest of the video, let's talk about the afterword. The afterword begins with a conversation between Gladwell and an epidemiologist. So an epidemiologist is a scientist who studies diseases. And this scientist happened to comment to Gladwell that he thinks the world would be a better place if AIDS had not been discovered. The point that he was trying to make is that because AIDS was publicized in the media, made into this really huge deal, it kind of became a social phenomenon. So yes, it was a disease that can be spread. However, it's also became kind of a social disease where people got scared of it and it got stigmatized, and all these things happened, and then it made it spread like even faster or even in like a major way. So if it had not gone to that point, if in the opinion of this epidemiologist, if they had tackled it at the local level early on, then maybe it wouldn't have been made such a big deal of if it wasn't made such a big deal of in the first place, right? So, I mean, that's obviously a biased opinion, and you can disagree with that. So obviously, I feel like some people will be like, that's complete BS. What are you talking about? Like, it's an infectious disease. Of course, it's going to spread no matter what you do. It has nothing to do with like social stigmatism or like media publicizing it. But I don't know. This is just one opinion of one person, right? And I think Gladwell is saying that he actually kind of agrees because throughout this whole book, he's talking about how like social events or social trends and things like that spread like real diseases, like an actual viral or bacterial infection. So an example, like we've gone through so many examples of that happening, but it's just we're so reliant on word of mouth despite having access to a massive amount of information right at our fingertips these days with the internet, with smartphones and iPads and such. Another example of a tipping point would be the Columbine school shooting. I know we're getting into like darker topics, but it's important to talk about these things. Okay, so the Columbine shooting was a tipping point for more school shootings that came later, and this is because a lot of the kids that are like struggling mental health wise, they unfortunately identified themselves with the Columbine school shooters, and because that school shooting happened, it kind of like it's like the suicide example that we talked about last week, right? Where it kind of gave them permission to act out in certain ways. So the Columbine school shooting was kind of a trigger for more school shootings that came later because it kind of inspired other people to do the same. And we see these social phenomenons unfold in other ways too. So kids in Belgium fell sick after drinking contaminated Coca-Cola, but it turns out that later that the contamination was not actually severe enough to cause the type of mass epidemic or sickness that was reported. So this was ultimately attributed to a case of mass hysteria, where if you don't know what mass hysteria is some crazy thing happens where people think that they're sick or they've been infected with some disease, but it's all in their head. It's not actually a real thing, but because they believe so strongly that they've been infected or they like drank contaminated Coca-Cola, for example, that they begin to actually get sick and physically experience symptoms, even though they weren't like sick at all. It was just all in their head. So the human mind is a very powerful thing, is what I'm trying to say and what Gladwell is trying to say here. Next, let's talk about the value of networks. So we kind of talked about this as well in this book with the rule of 150 about how human connections with each other kind of we weave this web of collective intelligence with other people, and that kind of makes us smarter. And that's like something that's unique about humans, where we are able to weave this web of interconnectedness with each other better than other animals, and we have the potential of working together more efficiently than animals, right? So, for example, the value of a network increases as more people join the network. So an example of that would be fax and email. This is kind of interesting because this is the opposite of what you would expect for commodities like oil, where if the quantity increases, then the value decreases, right? So if there's a lot of oil and we can't use it all, then the value of the oil goes down, right? Oil becomes cheaper if the quantity increases. But this is the opposite with things like fax and email, right? So as more people get email, as more people get a fax machine, remember fax machines, nobody has fax machines anymore, but imagine if fax machines were just invented and this was a completely new thing and you can send a document across wires for thousands of miles in an instant. wouldn't a lot of people want to use that, right? But the fax machines, when they first came out, were rather expensive, so not everybody rushed out to buy a fax machine at once. However, once enough people got fax machines, it became really convenient and it just took off. So, but it requires it to hit a tipping point, right? It requires a certain amount of people to get a fax machine first. But the value does increase as more people get fax machines, and the same thing with email. Eventually, though, we do develop this kind of immunity to information as things like email become so widespread that we stop paying attention to them, right? So this is another unfortunate fact where if something becomes too prevalent, then we kind of stop paying attention to them because the value eventually starts to plateau too, right? Like email is so ubiquitous that we get so many of them that we don't even pay attention or read emails anymore as closely. Whereas like now, if we get a letter, we probably would pay more attention to like a physical letter than to an email, right? But yeah, that's another phenomenon that Gladwell noticed. So lastly, let's talk a little bit more about Mavens. Right, so the 1-800 number on the back of a box of soap is a trap for the company to get the Mavens because, honestly, who calls a 1-800 number to talk about soap with some like random company, right? But some people do actually. That's the point, right? So some people actually call the number, and some people actually care a lot. So if they used a soap and they weren't satisfied with it, they will actually call the number and ask for a refund, right? So that's not who I am, right? That's probably not who you are. But if you are one of those people, then good for you, because that means you hold a lot of influence in the soap world, and the 1-800 number is supposed to like reach out to you because they want to satisfy you so that you can tell all your friends and family, hey, let's buy this brand of soap. And that makes a huge difference to the company because, I would imagine if you care that much about soap, people would come to you and ask for advice if they need a new soap or whatnot, right? So it's all about finding those people that are really passionate and they care a lot about a product, whether it be soap or whether it be something else, right? So Lexus, for example, is a company that took advantage of this as well, where they made a special effort to fix a problem with their latest line of flagship cars because they knew that the people who bought them were car mavens, right? So they really wanted to impress the people who bought a Lexus, and I think this was when Lexus first came to the American market, so they were competing against other known brands that were better established. So Lexus really wanted to make a name for themselves, so they really needed to impress the first wave of people who bought their cars, or else their reputation was gonna not be good, right? So they really wanted to impress the car mavens, so they made special efforts like showing up to their house to fix a car and on their driveway if needed. ITT Financial Services targeted teachers for opening up an IRA account when it was first introduced. So an IRA, if you don't know what that is, it's a special type of tax advantage investment account. It can help you save on taxes when you invest through an IRA as opposed to a regular investment account. So they targeted teachers because teachers were the perfect group because they were very underpaid. So they were investing, they were like prone to investing, and they could see the value of investing because they really wanted to increase their lifestyle and their income. And so the teachers saw an appeal of having a tax advantage account by using an IRA, and they also were in a unique position to tell the parents of the kids that they taught what they were doing for retirement and all that stuff. And teachers are maybe they're underpaid, but they're well respected, right? So the teachers would be like, hey, or the parents would be like, hey, if the teachers were doing something like this for their retirement, then must be a good thing, right? So this company called ITT Financial Services, they really hit the nail on the head by advertising to teachers. The point of this whole part is that finding the market mavens is a really important thing and is the key to building a successful business. Again, that's the whole like kind of theme of the book is finding those little things that make a huge difference in a situation. So whether it be finding the right people or finding the right changes you need to make to an ad campaign or something to make it take off, or it's just explaining something that had already happened in the past, where if it had happened another way, then this event wouldn't have occurred, or it wouldn't have been as popular or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the book. I hope you all enjoyed. This was a very enjoyable book for me personally, and yeah, I love reading it. And we'll do more books by Gladwell because this isn't his only book. He has a lot of other books that are also very interesting. So if you guys are interested, we can cover another Gladwell book if you want, or any book that you guys like. Please leave them down in the comments below as suggestions, and then I will read through all of them. So yeah, thank you all for watching. We wrapped up this book now, and then next week we're going to cover a new book that I haven't decided on yet, but will be announced soon, so stay tuned. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.